Go. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's episode of Interstellar Insights, part of the global launch of my new book, What's Space Got to Do with It? An Interstellar Guide to Success. This book is more than a continuation, it's a call to put purpose into motion. While the first volume shared 10 life lessons for personal growth, the second book moves from reflection to execution. It draws from over 35 years of experience in the global space ecosystems and conversations with over 200 global thought leaders who are shaping the future both on Earth and in orbit. An Interstellar Guide to Success translates powerful space based principles like systems thinking, visionary leadership, and strategic collaboration into practical tools for entrepreneurs, educators, policymakers, and emerging leaders. It's built around four core principles: leadership, awareness, access, and action. Each one is essential for creating meaningful impact in an ever evolving world. Today's session, From Earth to Orbit, brings together insights from three distinct chapters about those pillars. We'll explore how purpose, creativity, and mission driven leadership can launch careers, cultures, and communities into new realms of possibility. Our guests represent diverse sectors, disciplines, and perspectives, but what unites them is their catalytic approach to leadership. They operate with vision, integrity, and unwavering commitment to lifting others. So let's jump into it. I'm excited to introduce Alma Okpelefe, the Executive Director of World Space Week, a global education initiative that reaches over 90 countries every year. Alma is a strategist, a systems thinker, and a passionate advocate for space as a tool for equity and empowerment. Welcome, Alma.
Thank you so much for having me, Shelli. It's really a privilege and indeed an honor to be here today with you. I love how you said my name. A lot of people don't get it right, Alma Palife. And I'm currently, like you said, the Executive Director of World Space Week Association. And we, on behalf of the UN, coordinate what we like to term as the largest space event on Earth, which is really a time between the 4th and the 10th of October every year, where we like to place the world's focus on the space sector to celebrate the wins, the challenges, the milestones, and really create a cross-sectoral platform that enjoys, for people that enjoy and want to celebrate space. So last year we celebrated over 15,000 events, and we're looking forward to having even more events celebrated across the world this year. And I'm particularly delighted that, Shelli, you've decided to have your official launch during World Space Week, which will definitely be a highlight for this year. So my background is actually in law. I'm a trained lawyer. I was a legal counsel for a satellite operator before I veered into advocacy work, but we can unveil that in the course of the interview. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Alma. We're so excited that you're joining us. And I'm glad I said your name correctly. So that's always a plus. Next, I'm delighted to welcome Eaton Stibbe, entrepreneur, impact investor, and astronaut with the Rakia mission. As one of the first private citizens to travel to the International Space Station, Eaton has dedicated his life to empowering others through education, innovation, and bold exploration. Welcome, Eaton. We're excited to have you join us.
Thank you very much, Shelly, and you are an amazing leader. Everything you did during your career and now even to bring all these opportunities to the public and to everyone who wants to join the sector and is curious about space and about everything around space. And that was my mission. My mission when I went to space personally was to bring as many people together with me to experience, to take part, to send their ideas, if these are artists, scientists, children, to space, because only very few people had the opportunity to be there actually. So at least to share these ideas, to share this experience is a commitment of every astronaut.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited, and we know many of your team members at the Rakia mission, and they're all fantastic. So it's an honor to have you with us, and it's an honor to hear about your mission and what Rakia is doing as well. So thank you. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Luli Solichian, a visionary artist, cultural strategist, and one of the few individuals whose artwork now resides on the moon. Whether through her moon-bound artwork or global creative initiatives, Luli shows us that storytelling isn't just about what we say, it's about what we leave behind. Luli, we're so excited to have you join us today. Thank you.
Hi, Shelly. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here because, as you know, I'm a storyteller and I'm just so thrilled to be part of this project because I think what you're doing is really important and bringing all these stories together to share your insights in such a creative way. I think it's going to have a very lasting impact. I'm a conceptual impact artist and I work with social impact thematics in different mediums. Sometimes it's sculpture or paintings or digital performances or photography, but always with the idea of, as you mentioned, leaving something behind, telling impactful stories that connect us around the world. And I think space is something that really ignites our imagination. And there's the dog that I was mentioning. It really is something that ignites our imaginations and brings us together in a very global way. So I had the honor and privilege of being invited to participate in the Lunar Prize Mission Museum, which is the first art museum on the surface of the moon. My artwork landed alongside 221 other artists on February 22nd, 2024. And it was just such an exciting event because this is the first time that something like this has happened.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And what's so exciting about all our global thought leaders today is they have very diverse backgrounds. So everyone thinks about space, they think about astronauts. So we have Eaton, but we have artists, Luli, we have Alma, you were a lawyer and came into the space industry. So it's all very exciting. And that's what people want to hear next. They want to hear a little bit about your leadership journey. How did you get to where you are? So, Alma, we'll kick it off with your story first. What inspired you to lead in your field, and how has your leadership evolved over time?
Well, I mean, I still find it really odd to be referred to as a leader. I don't quite feel like I have really become accustomed to the title because for me, it was not a planned journey in any way, right? The way I found myself in the space sector, for starters, was simply because it was the first job I was offered, really. I went to university in the UK, and oddly enough, at that point, I was actually offered £50 to do a course in space law, but it was on a Friday afternoon, and I had other more social things planned for that space of time. So I opted not to do that. And ironically, a year and a half later, I'm back in Nigeria, and the first job I'm offered is to be legal counsel for the newly formed satellite operator. And we went on to launch the first communication satellite in sub-Saharan Africa. So I really learned on the job. I mean, there was no preparation, there was no point of reference at that point for any space lawyer at that point in Nigeria. So it was a very steep learning curve, learning on the job. And I found that over time, one of the greatest challenges I had was always trying to justify why we needed a space program, right? Whether it's speaking to the legislators, the certain arms of the executive, and even the general public. In fact, I'd say in particular, the general public, trying to convince them that, yeah, space is big, or at least it's going to be big. And it's very important that we participate. You can imagine at that point, Nigeria was one of the first movers in the space sector in Africa, behind maybe Egypt and South Africa. So you really had to make that case at that point, right? And then there was a question of expertise, which really, with hindsight was really lacking. And so there was a lot of trial and error. And I think that's the beauty of leadership, right? Not getting everything right all the time, having actually growing on the job and understanding. It gives you a lot of empathy to understand that people, have a process as well that you can guide them through as well, with all the experience you've garnered over the years. And so, like I said, one of my major challenges was trying to make that case for space. And that boiled down to a lack of awareness, right? You can't go further than what you know. And the public just wasn't educated on space or its relevance generally. And which is why when the opportunity came up to work for the World Space Week Association, which is one of the oldest space advocacy organizations in the world, it was really a no-brainer, right? Trying to get that message across every year globally about how important space is. I feel that that is really the bedrock for anything else you want to do. If if the government had been better informed and the people had been better informed about the importance of space very early on, it would have made my work so much easier. And maybe my trajectory may have been different as well. So I feel with leadership, it's very important to fail and fail early, right? To internalize that so that you have some empathy and you're able to direct as well, to direct and mentor others.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Eaton, we'd love to hear about your leadership journey, obviously from the Israeli Air Force to now being an astronaut, but you're also a philanthropist and an investor. So we'd love to hear about that leadership journey.
So as a child, I would go to sleep like Superman, in this position. And this was a dream to float freely, go around the world fast, speed. That was my childhood dream. And actually, when I entered the space station first time from the Dragon, suddenly I remembered I committed to my grandkids that I would fly in like Superman. So I put that position, and I have a great photo of that. So this free flight is a dream. It was a dream for me, and once I accomplished that, it's something that I'm willing to go back tomorrow. When the market opened the opportunity for private astronauts to join the excitement of space exploration, I jumped on board. My friend Ilan Ramon on the Columbia did not come back with his crew. I was there at the launch, and I was jealous. I really wanted to be there. And when the opportunity came, I just jumped on board and joined the first private mission to the International Space Station. But I understood that it's not like called space tourism. It's a mission. It's a full mission. It's something we have to build. So our Rakia team, together with the Ramon Foundation, we created a private space agency, actually. I don't know, that's automatic on the Zoom. I don't know who's deciding on those movements. Anyway, we created a team to build a mission to space from scratch. And it was exciting because we found out that national astronauts that go to space, they are very limited in what they can do in art, in education, in outreach. They are mainly maintaining the platform. That's most of their work on board. And here you come basically for 10 days. We stayed for 17, but then we had to build the whole mission, bring along as many people as possible. So we called for proposals, any proposals, from poets, from painters, from scientists, from Nobel Prize winners, anyone. What can I do in space? And there we built a whole mission together with NASA, Huntsville, and the rest of the crew. And what is exciting about what Luli mentioned about impact is that as I come from the impact investing area, where we um, intentionally define the impact we want to achieve in advance. That's the first step. So all the selection of what we do was based on the objectives that we had for the mission. And then we could measure, when we came back, we could measure the results and see if we complied, succeeded, where we failed, and actually we can plan the next mission better. So this impact is very important to be measured and to be evaluated. So each mission to space, which is expensive and many resources and risky, can be effective.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, Luli, I know you have an amazing leadership journey too. We'd love to hear your story.
I think part of being called a leader or defining oneself as a thought leader in any field really starts with being confident enough to speak up about a certain subject and understanding that no one knows everything on any given topic. And especially in these cutting edge fields, no one has been an expert for far longer than you have been an expert. You know, some people have had different experiences, but these fields that we're talking about, they're it's the Wild West. This is just starting out. So I think my journey began with curiosity. I think any journey begins with curiosity, with wanting to understand a little more. And I think a lot of the time people are turned off with something when they don't understand it. They just get blocked off. And for me, it was kind of the opposite. When something was curious, I wanted to really dig a little deeper, and it's kind of a rabbit hole, right? As you start scratching the surface and digging a little deeper and getting to know, um, then I kind of became a thought leader in the field, and I do a lot of public speaking, which a lot of people hate, and they're deathly afraid of that. And for me, it's fun. I did a lot of theater as a child, for example, so no stage fright there. And I was at a conference waiting to go on stage, and somebody approached me and they said, we've been listening to you over and over, in different conference circuits, and we really like your perspective. I think we find what you're saying very interesting. How would you like to send your art to the moon? And this was such a cockamamie idea, it was so random. And I said, sure, of course, I'd like to send my art to the moon. And then they told me about this project, the Lunar Prize Mission Museum. It was the first time that the United States was going back to the moon since 1972. And this was a private-public partnership. Um, and as part of that partnership, they were putting a museum, which is the museum consists of 16 kind of dinner-sized plates where all the artwork is laser etched into those discs. So it is physical work that's on the moon. And it took a very long time. This project was delayed by years. So I was like, I don't know if that's going to happen, and I'm not really sure this is going on. And finally, when the launch party was at the Kennedy Space Center, and walking in there with my husband among all these rockets, and then seeing my name as featured artist inside the Kennedy Space Center at NASA was just such an incredible moment, because that leadership started with just taking that first step of wanting to know more, and then wanting to share my thoughts about what I learned, because I think that's what changes are, what separates us from the chat GPT. We might get the information, and then what do we do with that information? How do we add our own seasoning to it, and connect it with something else? So I think that's just that for that. And speaking up, that's how it started.
Excellent. I think all of our thought leaders today have shared that different entry points, different career paths, being open to new opportunities, and then even being the trailblazer that highlights these opportunities to others. So thank you for sharing that. Our next series of questions are thematic, and we'll have two thought leaders comment on each of those. So, our first themed question is about leading with purpose across disciplines. And this one is for Alma and Eaton. You've each led in unique arenas, from education and advocacy to entrepreneurship and exploration. How do you stay grounded in your purpose while navigating these different roles, audiences, and cultural contexts? So, Alma, we'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Well, I'd say in my case, purely because I'd worked in a particular function for so long before what I do now, I believe I was at the point where my personal values really had to be aligned with the professional values. It was really a non-negotiable at this point. And I feel that it makes leadership so much easier, right? You don't have to second guess yourself, it makes everything flow very nicely. Um, you also need to be very aware of your environment, especially in an organization like World Space Week. You have to know who your audience is. As it is, for World Space Week, the audience is literally everybody, right? But even exactly, but even within that, there's different strata, right? There's the different stakeholders, and you need to understand how to engage with them on that level. For instance, we have educators what so I ask myself, okay, what are perhaps some of the things that are standing between them and a World Space Week celebration? Is it a case of not having the right toolkits, not really, perhaps not even understanding the language? A lot of the time, because we're native English speakers, we take for granted that, not everybody else is. You need to make materials available in as many languages as possible. So it's also trying to be empathetic and understanding other people's position. Um, my background growing up, I went to a school in Eswatini. It was called Swaziland at that time, and it was particularly set up to as almost a statement against apartheid in South Africa. So from a very young age, we were all taught about diversity. We had students from everywhere. It's a United World College, so you get students from across the globe. So that's how I was raised, to really treasure diversity and to be very respectful of other cultures. So I carry that across with what I do. For instance, just earlier, well, last month, we were invited to the International Space Camp in Mongolia. Like ordinarily, I don't have to take that trip, thousands of miles across the world from Nigeria. But I really wanted to understand, how they celebrate World Space Week. This event was actually in preparation for World Space Week in October, but I wanted to see what being associated with World Space Week meant to them because they were so excited. And of course, it conveys over the internet and over our Zoom calls, but I really wanted to experience it in person. And yes, it was a very long, long trip, several hours. But I'm so glad I made it because just being able to engage one-on-one with people, and which sometimes, especially post-COVID, is a bit lacking, right? Being there in person, being immersed in their culture, understanding that they are an emerging space nation, Mongolia, and understanding how their ecosystem works and what may be some of the challenges in putting on World Space Week's events. It was being there in person, second to none, right? So there's that human connection that people require, right? In anything that you're doing, it helps to connect with people on a very as personal a level as possible as is permitted. Um, I believe that helps being able to design to be able to actually engage with them and understand what their various needs or varying needs may be.
I think
Excellent.
I can pick up from that multicultural point um, that Alma mentioned, which I completely agree with. Space is multicultural. Even during training at NASA, JAXA, ESA, with all these different cultures and the crew coming from different parts of the world and meeting Europeans and Russians on board. It's a multicultural uh, experience. Many people from many parts of the world live on the space station and very depend on each other. They have to work together, help each other. Um, Very similar to what we should be doing on Earth, um, keeping the platform
Oh,
working, taking care of each other, not allowing things to go wrong, seeing if someone is in need, so helping him out. And that's with no relationship to the your origin, culture, or any other aspect, personal aspect. And for example, one of the artworks that I did in space, that I performed, I did I think 15 art related projects. One of them was called Nothing in Space, where an artist, Ohad Pishoff, asked me to do nothing. So to sit there for an hour. I needed to tie myself down somewhere, so it was on the ceiling not to disturb others during their work hours, and spend this expensive time doing nothing, not falling asleep, not meditating, not doing any exercise, just experiencing this nothing. And there's no language there. This is something that everyone can connect with and think about and try to understand why and what and why waste this precious time on doing nothing. And for me, it was an amazing experience, which I can I could write a whole book about.
excellent. Thank you so much. I think sometimes we forget that we get so busy filling our schedule that sometimes, Eaton, it's
Mhm.
nice to do nothing. Thank you both, Alma and Eaton, for those wonderful answers. Our next thematic question is about turning awareness into activation. Now, we'll have some focus questions for Luli and Eaton on this one. Luli, your chapter explores how creative storytelling can reshape how people see themselves in science and in space. How can art be used not just to raise awareness, but to invite action?
I think art is one of the things that I love about art is because of its ludic nature, because of its playful and fantastical nature of what it is. It opens up a space to have difficult conversations that people would otherwise not be willing to engage in, right? So it opens up this play area where we let down our guard, and that space is so important to discuss challenging and often conflicting ideas and to get to share each other's perspectives, right? So, for example, for this for the Lunar Prize Mission Museum, I was part of a cohort of artists that were asked to prepare of impact artists that were asked to prepare work that was directly related to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And when I was approached with this project, it was kind of a big deal. What do I send to the moon? And I decided to tell my grandmother's story. My grandmother, Shelli, you know this story because we spoke before, but my grandmother is 85 years old, and she is an online multiplayer gamer. So when I asked you to think about an online multiplayer gamer, you're probably picturing in your head a 15-year-old teenage boy. You don't think about an 85-year-old Jewish Latina woman because that's not what comes up first to your mind. But we have these preconceived notions of gender, of equity, and I thought her story was really so inspiring because she's a woman that understands that Learning is a lifelong endeavor. It's not something that stops when you graduate from high school or you get your master's or college or a PhD, but it's an attitude that we carry on throughout our lives. So she comes from a generation that has had to adapt to every single technological change. There's no other generation on the surface, on the history of the earth that has had to be more adaptive and has incorporated more technological changes than my grandmother's generation. I mean, this is a woman that was born in a small town in La Pampa in Argentina, where the population today is 2,500 people. There was no electricity, no refrigeration, no. She would go to school in a horse-drawn cart. So the invention of the telephone, the fax, the refrigeration, cars, the internet, uh, learning to play digitally. These are all adaptations that that she has embraced, and I thought that was worth highlighting. I think she's a woman that challenges preconceived notions of gender, as we were mentioning, and she really understood that technology is about human connectivity, which is, I think, a lot of times when people think about space or they think about technology, they see it as this cold nothingness. And it really is about connecting with each other. It really is about a legacy, about reaching out, about being able to stay together. So her story really connected with so many people around the world, and they found it so inspiring. So it was really such a great example of how storytelling and how art can have a lasting impact and challenge how we view the world and open up this.
I lost her.
I lost her too. I'm sure she will come back. Well, Eaton,
Fro-
let's jump in with your insights about how your work spans aerospace, philosophy, and innovation. We'd love to hear more about your stories about how awareness, especially in underserved regions, translates into opportunity or transformation.
I would focus on the issue of ability to create change, not receive things as they are, but understand that everyone can create a change, not be passive and do things. I think that's a very important educational message, um, because education is changing fast. The traditional education systems are lagging behind the the modern times because children have access to internet, have access. Want me to jump in Zoom again? Because I see we lost everyone. Shelli,
Uh, yeah, I'm not sure what's. I'll let you keep going and I'll work on the technical issues here.
I can wait a minute. I
Okay.
mean,
We'll just put this on. Okay, you're going. Thank you so much for
All
your
right,
patience.
wonderful. Okay,
Rosen.
so we're back. Project. Oh, I think it got cut off again.
You're with us. You're back with us.
Okay. It says internet connection unstable, but this is what we deal with when we talk about space and anything dealing with technology. Some technological difficulties are kind of part of the recipe. So I'm glad to be in this company. As we were discussing, I think my grandmother's story was such a great example about the power of storytelling and how this a simple story can have such an impact and around the world, and it allowed people to not only connect with this idea of education, of gender equality, of preconceived notions, um, of technological advances, but also it ignited everyone's imagination about space, about legacy, about what are the stories about us, about our humanity that we're trying to preserve.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. Insightful that you shared the story about your grandmother. That's amazing. We'll pivot to Eaton. Your work spans aerospace, philanthropy, and innovation. How have you seen awareness, especially in underserved communities, translate into opportunities or transformation?
Well, I can't let go of what Luli mentioned about her grandparents and grandmother. I took some threads to space from 1940 that my grandmother gave my mother as a survival kit during the war. And I took these threads, which is cotton and nylon and another one, and I took them to space. And what was interesting about it, when I showed them also to the astronauts and to the people on Earth on video conference, why did you take those? I mean, why do you take things to space? When you go to space, space travel is away from Earth. You cannot jump home and take your kids out of school and go back. um, this feeling of fear, maybe you won't come back, or um, missing the family, being so far away, is something that for long travels is very effective. So you try to bring along some things that are close to your heart and you give you the feeling of remembering the family. In order to create this excitement and not only fear from exploration, space exploration, curiosity is the main thing to inspire the kids and adults and scientists all together. In order for them to ask questions. There are so many attractions in the screens, the different games, and all the potential gaming, like grandma there. Um, but still, for them to raise their head above the screen and, hey, what is that? Why did he take a broken shell to space? Or what is what will happen to someone who travels to Mars? Can humans live on the moon? Why would an art creation be put on the moon? For who? Are there aliens? All these questions are those who really open the mind and create feeling like a good artwork. A good artwork is something that you respond to. It's not just, okay, that's very nice, and you go on. It's something you stop, you look, and you try to answer, and you have these emotions to the work or inside yourself about the work or about yourself. I think this is the most important power or the most potential that space can offer people. Um, the unknown, the big question marks of the unknown. I wanted to say something about Africa. Africa is a bit is not in Africa is not enough involved in space exploration. I think Nigeria specifically should be the first country to send an astronaut to space, because one astronaut, it's you.
I volunteer.
So one astronaut, which is a big investment, training and costs and everything, but he can inspire a whole nation. He can change the future of a nation. He can bring kids to be more involved in so many sectors, not only in STEM, but in arts and philosophy and in law, in many areas. And that's the power of space, and that's something that we should take advantage of.
I think what Aidan is saying is so true, but also projects like Shelli's book, this building of community. There's so many people that view space as something so extraneous to us, so far away from us. And they might have great ideas and so much untapped potential. And I think the first step towards harnessing that potential is building community. I think projects like what Shelli's doing, where she's taking 200 thought leaders and experts and people that are involved with the space industry from different walks of life, from different points of view, from different career paths, and connecting us all together. That network in itself, it's so valuable, and building upon that network and adding more neurons to that is going to have such a lasting impact, because the idea of space is just infinite, what we can do, what we can accomplish, and people from different walks of life, different industries will have such varied approaches on problem solving, that the more we connect these people together, the faster we'll be able to grow this field.
And I will add that you said space feels so far away. It's only 100 kilometers away. It took us from launch to becoming an astronaut less than 3 minutes, which is
Exactly.
amazing.
Well, thank you both, Eaton and Luli, and I'm deeply honored by your kind words, Luli. Thank you so much. I what you both been talking about really ties into the next thematic question, which is about cultivating connections and access. We just talked about it, building community. So, Alma, as the executive director of World Space Week, you build bridges between these global stakeholders and the public. What does it take to design truly inclusive and accessible outreach programs at scale?
Just like you rightly said, Shelley, I mean, one of our main mission objectives is to bridge that divide, whether it's between space and society or between stakeholders and how they engage with space generally. Now, I feel what is most important is to be very intentional at the planning phase. You have to consider who is going to be included in your grand design from inception. And we do this because we have a fairly diverse and very experienced board, and we select a theme every year for World Space Week. So you'll find that over time the themes have been as universal as possible to ensure that everybody can engage with it and interpret it in a way that suits their cultural context. I was just reminded of a time in school. I gave you some background about the sort of high school that I went to in Eswatini. So for midterm, I used to always bring a friend home. I lived in Mozambique at the time, which was like a 3 hours drive. So I always used to bring a friend home. And so for the first time, I brought home a vegetarian, which was just total shock and horror for my mother. We're carnivorous Nigerians. And she just didn't know what to do with her. And she just didn't know what to make, what do vegetarians eat? Went totally over her head. Now, what did she resort to doing? Like picking the meat out of the Nigerian food that she made, which seems all right on the on the face of it, but it's really an afterthought. So depending on why you're a vegetarian, you might have issues with the stock that food is actually cooked in. And that's what we find in a lot of initiatives. The inclusivity, the access is perhaps an afterthought, and not necessarily from the design right up from the ground up. So that's what we try to do, to have themes that are really inclusive. Like this year, we're looking at living in space. Now, that can be interpreted in any way, in any culture, in any nation, any stakeholder group, in any way that is most suitable for that group. And so in addition, we also try to provide materials that you can use for engagement during that period as well. So I feel that there is a level of cultural insight that you should have. Of course, you can't, pick up an encyclopedia and study everybody's culture, but you learn a lot from listening, right? Just being able to listen, whether it's through feedback or just general conversations, you'll get an idea of what people's pain points are. And just as Luli said earlier, having that connection. Why has World Space Week grown over the years for the past, well, since it's been called World Space Week, it's been 25 odd years, but the outreach has gone on far, far beyond that. It's because of people being able to have an emotional connection with space. Right. And one of our strong points with World Space Week is the imagery. Well, we haven't gone into like movie making or anything of that sort, but what we really try to do every year is capture imagery from across the globe on how World Space Week was celebrated in various countries, in various under various climates and jurisdictions. And those pictures tell 1,000 words. We have pictures, especially from countries that only don't even have a space program, right? You're wondering, how are they celebrating space? They're interpreting it in a way that is contextually relevant to them, and that's expressed in the sort of imagery that they supply to us. So being able to scale, really, I'd say from inception, consider the totality of your audience, right? And also give them the tools to be able to engage effectively as far as you can. For not-for-profit, it's not always easy, but there is support out there, and there are some free resources as well. And just generally try and tell their stories for them through the imagery, so that you can really try and catalog that emotional connection that they felt when they had the events, and hopefully that translates to other people through the imagery as well.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I have been to Eswatini as well. I'll share that with you. Um,
Oh,
so, Luli, your efforts in public diplomacy and space culture bring visibility to underrepresented voices. How do you approach access, not just as a physical doorway, but as an emotional and cultural one?
Well, it's a difficult question, and it's something that I'm dealing with right now. I was mentioning earlier, I have a museum show coming up in Argentina, and one of the reasons I'm so excited to be showing my work in this space is that it's a cultural center that is free and open to the public. Uh, the work that I'll be showing, which should not be, confrontational in any way, shape, or form, I think, um, is kind of controversial, because it's a piece of art that was inspired by a collaboration that I did with Art Against Anti-Semitism to commemorate the first birthday of Kfir Vivas, an Argentine Israeli baby that was taken hostage during October 7th. And this work of art talks about the cost children pay all over the world and in all different cultures, the toll they pay in geopolitical conflicts. So besides the fact that it was inspired by this one particular child, it really talks about children going through war and strife all over the world. Um, but I found that so many people, especially, like the museum staff, was hesitant about having this and in this context, and what are people going to say. Um, but having art in spaces that are free and open to the public, in spaces that people from different cultures, I didn't want to have this show in a Jewish institution. I wanted to have it in a space where people from a different background are going to come and see this work and engage with it and have their own emotions and their own story embedded into this work, which is, it's not a graphic work, it's totally conceptual. People walk into a series of completely black tunnels that are solely illuminated by pacifiers, baby pacifiers, that are lit up from within, suspended inside dozens of cages. I've had this show twice in the United States, at a government center here in Florida, for example, and people came in.
Lost her.
issues with immigration, issues with access. I don't know if you lost me. It says the connection is unstable. But having art that talks about difficult subjects in open spaces that are accessible to everyone is.
It looks like we've lost her briefly. What I'll do is let's pivot to a question that really ties into that while we get her back on the
Yeah.
call. Is the next themed question is about building trust across borders and sectors, which I think ties in really nicely with what Luli was talking about. That trust is the foundation for shared success, especially in global initiatives. What have you learned about cultivating trust, whether between public and private sectors, across generations, or in cross-cultural collaboration? Eaton, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I completely agree with the definition that trust is essential for success. It removes obstacles. It creates the freedom to work together and um, and work together for the same, for a similar objective of, let's say, for example, fighting coronavirus or global warming or other issues that are protecting our spaceship Earth. And that is necessary to be done. And we can't only rely on nations and the United Nations to deal with that, but everyone has to feel some interest, some um, desire to contribute to that. And that's difficult because you feel you're small. But if you understand that each one of us can contribute, like one artwork can drive change in attitude. About attitude and outreach, I want to bring an example of the recent space mission of the Indian astronaut that went up to the station on AX4, Captain Shooks, and he asked our team to cooperate with his school. His school is a CMS. It's the City Montessori School in Lucknow, a huge city in India, in the largest state in India, Uttar Pradesh, of 220 million people in that state. And the school took upon itself to engage the children of the school. When I say that a large school, it's by Guinness book or records, it's the largest school in the world with 62,000 students now in 24 campuses in the city. And the first thing they did was create a competition for selecting the name of the mission of Captain Shooks, which is a very important thing. You said, like selecting a name for a child, which is very difficult. And once you choose the name, it suddenly becomes obvious, well, he couldn't have another name, or she could have no other name. And they chose a Sanskrit word, which is Vyomotsav, which is celebration of space in Sanskrit. And that immediately gives a happy attitude to everyone who starts dealing with the project, thinking about the project, celebrating space. And that is a huge entry point for thousands of children and people to look at the opportunity in a happy way.
Thank you so much. Alma, we'd love to hear your thoughts as you look at World Space Week and your other background. Since trust is the foundation, what have you learned about cultivating that trust between public and private sectors, generations, and cross-cultural collaboration?
Well, even outside World Space Week, I'd say actually particularly outside World Space Week, I have firsthand, experience of how important it is to have trust, especially in a low trust society. when we launched the first satellite, NitroComSat-1, that was, I believe, in 2007, roughly 18 months later, it suffered a defect in orbit and had to be deorbited. Now, at that point, people who previously you thought were not interested in space, all of a sudden were, and were up in arms. In fact, a lot of them believed that it was perhaps a white elephant project. It never actually existed. And we probably collectively just pulled the wool over the public's eyes and maybe squandered the funds. Now, this, from a technical point of view, it seems like ridiculous assertion. But because of the state of the society and the trust level, it's something that may or may not have happened in the past and rightfully given them that disposition. So when you're working from a point, it makes things so much harder when you're working from a point where there's already very little trust in the system. So how then do you begin to cultivate that trust, whether it's especially as the government is and will be for some time, especially on this continent, a driver of the space sector, right? So it's very tied to the politics within individual nations and how they begin to rebuild institutions in a way that are transparent and allow the population to actually understand what they're doing and believe in what they're doing. So it's really a collective effort. Awareness, definitely, like I said earlier, does play its part in allowing people to begin to, put those building blocks of understanding together. And so in a case where there was, heaven forbid, a repetition of what happened, people will be better informed of what it actually takes to launch a communication satellite, which orbit it's situated in and how it generally functions to know how, how the assertion that it could have been a white elephant project is not actually founded. But awareness does help with slowly chipping away at some of that distrust that's been built up over time with government institutions. I find also here, and this is, I'll speak just to Nigeria, that maybe because of cultural dispositions, there needs to be more intergenerational, communication. And in Nigeria, we say need to be carried along. Because recently I went for a space conference here, and I was alarmed to see that there were very few young people. Very few people. You had the decision makers, yes, but you really need to hear. It's like having a conference and having no women, as far as I'm concerned. You definitely need to have the voice of the youth. Yesterday, I was at a summit for the National Industrial Summit in Nigeria, and they indicated that the median age in Nigeria, and bear in mind the 230 million of us, is 18.5 years. So you can imagine a population that young not being properly represented in many matters, but in this case, in space matters. So there needs to be very deliberate inclusion of certain demographics within certain debates, certain discussions from a very early stage, and let them become accustomed to even participating as well, because a lot of them have even resigned themselves to the fact that they probably won't be included, and we need to begin to change that narrative.
I think
So definitely,
mentoring programs are so important for those kind of initiatives. If you can build, and it goes back to networking and relationship building, if you can connect people that have experience in a field with younger people and have them build relationships one-on-one, that has such a lasting impact.
absolutely, absolutely. Which is why, subsequent to the conference that I attended, I actually co-chaired a research conference here in Abuja, and I ensured that there were students present, right? There were young researchers, or very young, and just firstly to just expose them to what's possible. Right? They need to even know what is possible and to see who's out there, to hear from other people, and also to give them that avenue to make those connections if they so wish. Right. So, because the major thing is a lot of them are not even aware of the possibilities that exist. And so they need to be put in certain rooms to actually appreciate the sheer breadth of what is available to them.
Excellent.
You know
Thank
that
Go ahead.
Kofi Annan, the Secretary General of the United Nations, established the International Day of Peace, 21st September every year. And at that day, the Secretary General invites children and they go and they ring the peace bell that is in the yard of the United Nations building in New York. And Kofi Annan was from Ghana, from Kumasi, and I took a small 3D printed bell of a sample of the same bell that is installed, the World Peace Bell that is installed in the United Nations. I took it with me to space as a symbol of peace. I was not there on the 21st of September, but I rang the bell there. and the king of that region, the king of Ashanti, Otumfo Osei Tutu II, he sent with me a ring, a golden ring of the Ashanti people with a symbol of trust and cooperation, which was very important, and I was very happy that that was one of the ancient symbols of their culture. That I could take that with me to space.
So this multicultural team building approach that happens in this particular uh, industry oftentimes doesn't happen in other areas of our society. So it's something really worth harnessing, because you have this international multicultural team building. You also have this sense of competition that's a driver as well, which is very healthy for growth. So there's aspects of the space, of the space industry that are very positive overall for humanity, I think.
Excellent. Thank you all so much. I know we could continue to go on, but I want to be respectful of all our times and give you the final lightning question. As we're closing, what is one message or insight you hope our audience carries with them about leadership, about purpose, or about the future of space and society? So, Luli, we'd love to hear your thoughts first.
Wow, those are big thoughts. I haven't gathered them yet, but I think to get involved. A lot of the times, it just starts with getting involved. Be curious. Um, Go to conferences. Reach out to people that are in the field. I think Shelli, you and I connected over a group chat. We hadn't met each other initially. Like, so these networks are so powerful and such great drivers of growth that I think to succeed, you just have to have a stake in it.
I love that. I love that. Eaton, we'd love to hear your closing comments about what could our audience take with them about leadership, purpose, or the future of space and society.
Well, space is open for everyone. So psychologists, philosophers, artists, not only rocket scientists and physicians. So anyone can take a part in space as humanity is growing its presence abroad. I would say abroad, out of our planet, there will be space for everyone in space, and well, that's the message.
I love that. I love that. There's space for everyone in space. Absolutely true. With that, Alma, I'll give you the last thought about what can our audience take with them about leadership, purpose, or the future of space and society.
Thank you, Shelli. Well, I would say firstly that space folk are really nice, very accommodating. I mean, really, all my engagement with Shelly, I'm constantly asking for things, or constantly asking you to mentor or turn up at some place, and you've never declined, right? And I find this is a general thread, in the space sector. People are always very accommodating, always willing to lend their voice to support whatever it is you're trying to do. So if you're just entering the space sector, there is a lot of support within the sector. Um, I personally, as far as the African continent is concerned, I really want to be in a position to set up opportunities for others to engage in the sector and get out of it what they wish from the sector. I mean, we're at a very dynamic time, especially here with new infrastructure in terms of African Space Agency being set up. So there's a lot more focus on space now. It's not like it was decades ago. So there's a lot more room for everybody. Just like the other participants have said, there's space for everybody. And just engage as much as possible. And there is support when you so choose to do so.
Well, thank you so much. This has been such a powerful session, and thank you all for joining this conversation of our Interstellar Insights series. Today, we're honored to have learned from three extraordinary global change makers. Alma, you reminded us that awareness is not just information, it's an educational force that unlocks global participation. So thank you. Eaton, you showed us that role models fuel possibilities. Your journey highlights how bold actions, impact investing, and personal courage can be channeled into purpose-driven missions. And Luli, you illuminated the power of storytelling through artwork. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Now, for our audience, I invite you to carry one insight forward, something that sparked curiosity. We heard that word a lot today, that offered a new perspective or helped you see the world through a wider lens. If today's conversation inspired you, I encourage you to dive deeper into these chapters, chapter 3, 4, and 5. Check out the book or look more at those Interstellar Insight Series webinars that are available on YouTube and launching during World Space Week, 4 to 10 October. I want to thank Alma for her leadership in that. And until next time, I'm Shelli Brunswick, and I look forward to seeing you around the galaxy.